Welcome, my friends. Before we start, take a deep breath. Find a cozy spot. Maybe curl up under a blanket or rest your head on a pillow. Let your shoulders relax. Let your body sink just a little into comfort. This is your time, a time to wander through ideas, through stories, through the minds of people who lived thousands of years ago. And somehow, their thoughts still reach us today. Now, imagine yourself walking down a narrow street in Athens over 2,000 years ago. The air is warm, the sun casting long shadows over stone buildings, and everywhere you look, people are talking, debating, laughing, shouting. Not about sports, not about gossip, but about questions that seem simple, yet carry the weight of the universe. What is justice? What is truth? How should we live? Greek philosophy was born in this world, and it wasn't born in a library or a university because there weren't any yet. It was born in the streets, in the marketplaces, in the public squares where anyone could wander by and listen or join in. Philosophy, in its purest form, started as a conversation. One person asked a question, another person gave an answer, and slowly, ideas began to grow, like tiny seeds pushing through the cracks of a city, eventually shaping the way humans think, even today. Now, I know when you hear the word philosophy, your mind might start to wander towards something a little intimidating. Maybe you think of long, confusing sentences, big words you can't pronounce, or people stroking their beards in thought for hours. And honestly, yes, that happened. But philosophy, at its heart, is just curiosity. The kind of curiosity that makes you stop and ask, why? About literally everything around you. It's the curiosity that wakes you up at 3 a.m. thinking about stars, or why cats always land on their feet, or why chocolate somehow tastes better when you're not supposed to eat it. That same curiosity pushed the minds of the ancient Greeks into asking questions about life, the universe, and everything in between. In those early days, the Greeks were moving away from seeing the world as a place ruled entirely by gods and fate. Don't get me wrong, gods were still around, and myths were everywhere, explaining everything from thunderstorms to sudden illness. But slowly, thinkers started to wonder if maybe there was a way to understand the world through reason, through observation, through asking questions, through thinking clearly. This was the start of something new, something that would echo through the ages, the beginning of philosophy. Think about Thales, often called the first philosopher. Thales didn't just sit around guessing about life. He tried to figure out the basic stuff, like, what is the world made of? He said, water is the source of everything. Sounds simple, maybe a little funny. We know now that water isn't literally the secret ingredient of the universe. But his point wasn't about water. It was about asking the right questions and looking for answers beyond the stories people were telling. That tiny shift, moving from myth to reason, was revolutionary. And it wasn't just Thales. Thinkers like Anaximander and Heraclitus added their own sparks. One said, everything is in flux, meaning the world is always changing. Another said, there is a unity behind the diversity, trying to find patterns in chaos. Even back then, humans were trying to make sense of life in a way that still feels familiar today. Now, I want you to picture this. You're wandering through Athens, a warm breeze brushing your skin, and there's a crowd gathered around Socrates. We'll meet him soon enough, but for now, just imagine that curiosity in action. People were gathering, not for entertainment, not for games, but for ideas. Ideas that were alive, ideas that challenged the comfortable, ideas that made people question themselves, and sometimes made them a little uncomfortable. That's what philosophy does, and it's exactly why it matters. It's funny to think about, but philosophy wasn't always taken seriously. Some people thought philosophers were just dreamers or troublemakers. Socrates himself, whom we'll meet soon, got into a lot of trouble for asking too many questions. He walked around, poking holes in people's arguments, asking them to think deeper, to examine their lives, and, well, some people didn't like it. But maybe that's the charm of philosophy. It pushes you. It nudges you into thinking about things you'd rather not think about, like justice, virtue, or the meaning of life. And it does so in a way that can also be incredibly human and even a little funny if you pay attention. And here's something beautiful. These questions, these ancient conversations, didn't end in Greece. They didn't stay trapped in time. They traveled, passed from teacher to student, written down on scrolls, copied and recopied, translated and studied. They influenced the Roman world, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and eventually shaped the way we think, write, argue, and even vote today. Imagine that. A single question asked in a bustling Athenian marketplace can ripple across millennia, shaping thoughts you might have without even realizing it. That's the power of ideas. That's the power of Greek philosophy. So, as we begin this journey, let's settle into it. No rush, no need to take notes. Just let the stories unfold. Let the ideas drift around your mind like gentle waves, letting your imagination wander through ancient streets, past olive trees, temples, and the quiet corners where thinkers sat and dreamed. This is your time, a moment to explore, to listen, and maybe even to think about a question of your own. What would you ask if you were there in Athens, walking alongside Thales, Heraclitus, or Socrates? And with that, let's take a slow step into the next part of our journey, the birth of Greek philosophy. We'll meet the early minds who dared to question everything, the ones who started it all. Imagine standing at the edge of a new world of thought, where every answer led to another question, and every question opened a door into something bigger, something eternal. As we wander forward, picture those first sparks of curiosity flickering in the minds of people who lived thousands of years ago. Their questions were simple, their ideas bold, and their influence endless. And now, as our journey continues, we step into that world, the beginning of Greek philosophy itself, where myths met reason, and the first questions that would shape human thought were born. So here we are, stepping into the very beginning of something extraordinary, the birth of Greek philosophy. Imagine the streets of Athens again, narrow paths, the chatter of merchants, the clatter of sandals against stone. But instead of running errands or gossiping, people are starting to ask questions that don't have easy answers. Questions about the world, about life, about why things are the way they are. This is where it all begins, not in a university or a lab, but in the curious minds of ordinary people who just wanted to understand. Before philosophy, most explanations for the world came from stories. Thunder, angry God, floods, divine punishment. Life, well, life was probably a story passed down around a fire, and you just had to hope for the best. But gradually, thinkers, sometimes called the pre-Socratics, began to wonder if maybe there was a pattern, a reason, a logic behind all of this chaos. Maybe, just maybe, the world didn't have to be explained by stories alone. Take Thales of Miletus, often called the first philosopher. Thales looked at the world and thought, everything seems wet? Okay, not exactly in those words, but he did propose that water is the source of all things. Sounds a little funny to us now. Water is the root of everything? Maybe he just really likes swimming. But the point wasn't water. It was the method. He looked at the world, observed it, and tried to find an underlying principle. He didn't rely on myth. He relied on thought. That tiny shift from the gods did it to let me think about it was revolutionary. It was the first step toward understanding the universe through reason. After Thales came thinkers like Anaximander. Anaximander said, everything comes from the boundless. Sounds mysterious, right? He was essentially saying that there's a source or principle of the universe that isn't obvious. Something beyond the physical stuff we can touch or see. Imagine looking at the sky at night, seeing stars scattered across the darkness, and thinking, maybe there's something invisible holding it all together. That's what Anaximander did. And then there was Heraclitus. Heraclitus loved to stir things up. He said, everything is in flux. In other words, nothing stays the same. Rivers change, people change, even thoughts change. You can never step into the same river twice. If that sounds a little existential for 500 BCE, you're not wrong. His point was simple, but powerful. The world is always moving, always evolving, and understanding that change is key to understanding life itself. On the other hand, Parmenides had a very different view. He argued that change is an illusion. The world is, at its core, unchanging, eternal, and permanent. Now imagine these two minds meeting in a cafe, one saying everything changes, the other saying nothing changes. You'd have a philosophical debate louder than a marketplace brawl. Yet both ideas pushed humans to think in new ways. They challenged assumptions. They forced people to question what's real, what's important, and what it means to know anything at all. And that really is the heart of the birth of Greek philosophy, asking questions no one had asked before and refusing to settle for easy answers. These thinkers were brave in a quiet, intellectual way. They didn't wield swords. They didn't conquer cities. They conquered ideas. They challenged the ordinary, and in doing so, they created a whole new world of thought. Philosophy also started to touch everyday life. Thinkers began asking about justice, society, and ethics. How should people live? What is the right way to act? This wasn't just abstract thinking for the sake of thinking. It was deeply human, practical even. It was philosophy as a tool for living well, for understanding how to navigate a life full of challenges and uncertainties. Imagine someone wandering through Athens, carrying these questions like a lantern, shining light on the dark corners of human behavior. That's what early philosophy did. It illuminated the mind. And while we often focus on individuals, philosophy was also social. It was a conversation. People debated in marketplaces, under olive trees, at festivals. Ideas weren't written down at first. They were alive. You could hear them, challenge them, and maybe even change them. Philosophy, in this sense, was almost like a game, a mental gym where your thoughts got stronger with each question, each argument, each counterpoint. And unlike most gyms, there was no sweating required, just thinking, and maybe the occasional groan when someone asked a really tricky question. It's also worth remembering that these early philosophers weren't perfect. Some were wrong about almost everything by today's standards. But that doesn't matter. Their value wasn't in being right. It was in daring to ask, to explore, to wonder. Their curiosity became a spark that would ignite thousands of years of thought, debate, and discovery. Even mistakes, after all, are lessons. As we wander through this period, we can see philosophy starting to branch out. Some thinkers focused on nature and the universe, some on society, some on ethics, and some on knowledge itself. And slowly, these ideas began to form a framework, a way to think about thinking itself. They were building a foundation that future generations, including Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, would stand on. Imagine it like laying stones in a vast, complex structure, each stone carefully placed, each idea supporting the next, until one day, centuries later, the structure would be magnificent and lasting. And here's the beautiful part. You don't have to be a scholar or a genius to step into these ideas. Philosophy invites everyone. It's an open conversation across time. You can imagine yourself sitting among these early thinkers, asking questions, pondering answers, or even silently nodding to yourself as a new idea clicks. That connection, this quiet continuity of human curiosity, is what makes Greek philosophy alive even today. So as we move forward, we're not just going to meet names or memorize ideas. We're going to walk with them. We'll sit in the marketplace with Socrates, listen to Plato's visions of ideal worlds, and follow Aristotle as he observes life with meticulous eyes. We'll see how these minds, centuries ago, laid the groundwork for everything from science to democracy to the way we argue over dinner today. And now, as we leave the streets of early Greek thought behind, let's step closer to the figure who changed the game entirely, Socrates, the man who questioned everything, annoyed just about everyone, and somehow became immortal in thought. Imagine him walking toward us now, a little disheveled, sandals slapping on stone, eyes bright with curiosity, and a smile that says, "Let's think together." Now, let's meet Socrates. Imagine Athens again, busy streets, markets filled with the smell of fresh bread and the chatter of people. And there he is, Socrates, a man not much taller than a bookshelf, slightly hunched, hair a little messy, sandals worn from walking everywhere. He looks around and smiles, not because he knows something everyone else doesn't, but because he's about to ask a question. And not just any question, a question that might make someone stop, frown, and maybe rethink everything they believed. Socrates wasn't interested in giving lectures or writing books. In fact, he didn't write anything at all. All we know of him comes from his students, especially Plato, who adored him and sometimes dramatized him a little. But the essence of Socrates was simple. He asked questions, lots of questions, and he asked them in a way that poked at the comfortable beliefs of everyone around him. Now, imagine standing next to him in the marketplace. He asks the baker, "What is justice?" The baker scratches his head. Being fair, I guess." Socrates smiles faintly and asks, But what makes fairness fair? And just like that, the conversation spirals into something neither of them expected. Socrates didn't lecture. He guided. He nudged people to think deeper, to examine their own beliefs. This method of questioning became known as the Socratic method, and it's still used today in classrooms and debates all over the world. But it wasn't always fun. Some Athenians found Socrates irritating, to put it mildly. Here's a man walking around, making people doubt themselves, questioning the foundations of their lives. Imagine having a neighbor like that today. Why did you vote that way? Why do you buy that cereal? Are you sure your friendship is genuine? Yeah, it would get annoying. But that's exactly what Socrates wanted. He believed the unexamined life was not worth living. He wanted people to think, to question, to understand themselves and their place in the world. Socrates wasn't a philosopher for idle chatter. His focus was ethics, the study of how we should live. He believed that knowledge and virtue were connected. If you truly knew what was right, you would do what was right. If you didn't, your mistakes were born of ignorance, not malice. Think about that for a second. It's comforting in a way. People don't always mean to be bad. Sometimes they just don't know better. And maybe that's a lesson for all of us, even today. But of course, not everyone agreed with him. Socrates' habit of questioning authority, poking at the city's beliefs, and encouraging people to think for themselves eventually led to serious trouble. Athens was a city recovering from war, tense and wary of anyone stirring dissent. Socrates was accused of corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. Can you imagine that? Corrupting the youth, simply by asking questions and encouraging curiosity. It seems almost unfair, but that was Athens. At his trial, Socrates defended himself calmly, even with a touch of wit. He argued that he was helping the city by challenging people to think, by encouraging virtue, by seeking truth. But the jury wasn't convinced. They sentenced him to death. And so, Socrates spent his final moments calmly, philosophically, drinking a cup of hemlock, a poison that would end his life. Even in death, he remained steadfast in his beliefs, a quiet defiance that has echoed through the ages. It's tempting to think of Socrates as a serious, unapproachable figure, but he had a sense of humor too. Plato often described him laughing at human folly, smiling at the contradictions he saw, and teasing people gently, yet persistently. Imagine a man who could make you think deeply about justice and then wink at you, almost as if to say, "Don't take yourself too seriously." That balance of depth and lightness is part of what makes Socrates so enduring. Socrates' influence didn't end with his death. His student Plato carried his ideas forward, documenting his teacher's conversations and turning them into lessons for the world. But the real power of Socrates lies in the questions themselves. The questions aren't old or outdated. They're timeless. What is justice? How should we live? Do I truly understand myself? These questions still resonate because they speak to the heart of being human. And here's a quiet thought to reflect on. Socrates reminds us that asking questions is brave. It's uncomfortable. It challenges norms. It can even get you into trouble. But it's also the gateway to wisdom. Sometimes, the best answers come not from knowing, but from knowing that you don't know. And sometimes, that humility is more powerful than any certainty. Now, Think about walking with Socrates through the streets of Athens. The sun is lowering, casting long shadows over the marble columns of temples. You hear the laughter of children, the calls of merchants, the soft shuffle of sandals on stone. And amidst all that ordinary life, there's a man quietly asking questions that ripple through time. His ideas, his method, his courage, they are seeds that will grow far beyond Athens, shaping philosophy, education, and critical thinking for centuries. Socrates was more than a philosopher. He was a catalyst. He didn't give answers. He gave tools, the tools of questioning, of reflection, of examining life with curiosity and care. And that is why, even today, teachers, thinkers, and everyday people use his method to explore ideas, challenge assumptions, and grow in understanding. So, as we linger in this moment, walking alongside Socrates, remember this. Philosophy isn't about knowing everything. It's about being willing to ask, to listen, and to think. Sometimes the questions themselves are enough to guide us. Sometimes the questions are the adventure. And with that in mind, we step forward to meet the next spark of Greek philosophy, Plato. Plato, Socrates' devoted student, took his teacher's lessons and built a world of ideas around them. He wrote dialogues that captured Socrates' conversations, explored concepts of justice and truth, and imagined ideal forms that go beyond the physical world. From here, our journey moves into the visions of Plato, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, and the mind begins to see beyond the world we touch, toward a realm of ideas that continues to influence us today. Now that we've walked the streets of Athens with Socrates, asking questions and stirring curiosity, it's time to meet his devoted student, Plato. Picture a young man, listening intently, eyes wide with fascination, scribbling notes, or perhaps more likely, pacing around, mulling over ideas, because writing wasn't exactly fast back then. Plato was captivated by Socrates' questions, but he had his own vision, his own ideas, and a mind that could take what he learned and stretch it into something vast, something timeless. Plato was not just a student, he was a dreamer, and his dreams were about ideas, perfect, eternal, unchanging ideas that exist beyond our everyday world. He called these the forms. Now, before your mind starts spinning, think of it like this. Imagine a chair. You might sit on one every day. Some chairs are wooden, some are soft, some have 3 legs and wobble a little. But in Plato's mind, there's the idea of chairness, the perfect chair that exists somewhere beyond time and space, a model for all the chairs we encounter in the world. That's the essence of a form. Every physical object is a shadow, a copy of something ideal and eternal. And Plato loved stories. One of his most famous is the allegory of the cave. Picture a dark cave, prisoners chained to the wall, seeing only shadows cast by fire behind them. Those shadows are all they know. Then, one prisoner breaks free, climbs out of the cave, and sees the sun, the real world in all its beauty and complexity. When he returns to tell the others, they don't believe him. They prefer the shadows. Plato used this story to explore perception, reality, and the idea that most people live in a world of appearances, unaware of the deeper truths around them. It's a story that's still powerful today because, well, haven't we all stubbornly clung to our own shadows sometimes? Plato wasn't just fascinated by abstract ideas. He also cared deeply about people and society. In his book, The Republic, he imagined an ideal city, a society built on justice, wisdom, and virtue. It wasn't a blueprint you could actually follow, more a vision to guide thought. He divided society into classes: the rulers, who were philosophers, the soldiers, who protected the city, and the workers, who provided the goods and services everyone needed. Each class had its role, each person contributing to the harmony of the whole, and at the center of it all was the idea of justice, not just fairness, but each thing doing what it's meant to do. It's almost like an ancient recipe for a well-run city. Some of it might sound strict, even a little rigid, but the goal was always the same: a society where wisdom guided action and the common good mattered. And then there was Plato's Academy, one of the first schools in Western history. Imagine walking through the courtyard of the academy, surrounded by olive trees, students sitting on stone benches, discussing everything from ethics to mathematics. Plato believed education was the key to cultivating virtue, guiding the soul, and training people to think deeply. His academy became a place where minds could explore freely, question boldly, and develop ideas that would influence the world for centuries. It wasn't just a school. It was a sanctuary for curiosity, a hub for imagination, a playground for thought. Plato also introduced a subtle kind of humor into his philosophy, though it might be easy to miss. His dialogues, featuring Socrates often at the center, are filled with wit and gentle irony. Socrates asks questions that seem simple, only to expose the contradictions or confusion in someone's thinking. The humor isn't for laughs alone. It's a tool, a way to disarm pride, encourage humility, and nudge people toward deeper understanding. Imagine sitting there, trying to seem clever, only to realize the question has turned the tables on you. That's the joy Plato captures, the playful dance of intellect and curiosity. Another key theme in Plato's work is the relationship between knowledge and reality. Plato argued that what we see with our eyes, the physical world, is only a reflection of a higher, truer reality. Think of it as the difference between watching a movie and understanding the story behind its creation, the actors, the script, the director's vision. The shadows we perceive in daily life are fleeting, imperfect, and sometimes misleading. True understanding comes from looking beyond appearances, from seeking the eternal truths that guide everything we see. It's a lesson that still resonates today, reminding us to question assumptions, look for deeper patterns, and never settle for the first explanation that comes along. And Plato's influence didn't stop in Greece. His ideas traveled through the ages, shaping philosophy, politics, and science. Thinkers in the Renaissance studied him obsessively. Philosophers in the Enlightenment built their ideas on his foundation. Modern education, theories of justice, political science, even our approach to mathematics and science carry echoes of Plato's vision. That's the power of a mind willing to dream, to imagine, to see beyond the everyday. But perhaps the most enduring lesson from Plato is this: imagination and reason can work together. You don't have to choose between dreaming and thinking logically. Plato dreamed of ideal worlds, yet his ideas were grounded in reason, in careful thought, in dialogue. Philosophy, for him, was a balance of curiosity and rigor, of wonder and discipline. And maybe that's a lesson for all of us, even today. Dream big, but think clearly. Question boldly, but reflect deeply. As we leave Plato's world behind, it's hard not to feel a sense of awe. Here was a thinker who took the lessons of his teacher, Socrates, and expanded them into a vision so vast it still inspires us today. And yet, for all his idealism, Plato's work was deeply practical. It encouraged people to live justly, to seek knowledge, to cultivate virtue, and to imagine worlds better than the one they inhabit. That combination of imagination and action is a theme that will follow us as we meet the next giant of Greek philosophy, Aristotle. Aristotle, Plato's own student, took these ideas and grounded them in observation. If Plato looked upward toward the eternal forms, Aristotle looked around at the world, cataloguing, questioning, and analyzing. His mind was like a net, gathering knowledge from everywhere, trying to understand the rules and patterns of life itself. And just like Socrates and Plato, his influence would echo across centuries, touching everything from biology to politics to ethics. So, as we gently move from the vision of Plato into the world of Aristotle, imagine walking with students through the gardens of the academy, feeling the soft breeze, listening to debates that stretch from abstract forms to practical life, and sensing the excitement of minds in motion. Greek philosophy is alive in these moments, in these ideas, in these conversations that never truly end. And with that, we turn toward Aristotle, the philosopher of everything, whose careful observation of life and reason would leave a mark on the world that remains profound even today. As we leave Plato's lofty visions behind, let's meet his most famous student, Aristotle. If Plato was the dreamer, Aristotle was the observer. Imagine a man walking through fields, counting birds, watching the wind ripple through the grass, taking notes on everything he saw. He wasn't content to imagine ideal forms in some distant realm. No, Aristotle wanted to understand the world as it is, in all its messy, vibrant reality. He wanted to categorize it, study it, and figure out the rules behind it. In short, he wanted to know everything, and he wrote down a lot of it. Aristotle's curiosity was, honestly, staggering. He looked at plants, animals, stars, human behavior, politics, art, music, you name it, he studied it. And while that sounds overwhelming, his brilliance was in trying to find patterns, a way to make sense of the world. He believed that by observing carefully and reasoning logically, we could understand the causes and principles behind everything we see. And unlike Plato, he didn't rely on imagining a perfect world. He trusted his senses, experiments, and careful observation. Let's take ethics, for example. Aristotle asked, how should humans live? Not as a vague, mystical question, but a practical one. He proposed the idea of virtue ethics, which is about developing good habits, or virtues, that lead to a fulfilling life. Courage, generosity, honesty. These aren't just ideals. They're actions you practice every day. According to Aristotle, living well isn't about wealth, fame, or even happiness in the simple sense. It's about living in accordance with reason and developing your character. Imagine thinking about your own daily actions, like choosing to be patient with someone or honest in a small task, and realizing that each little choice shapes who you are. That's the practical wisdom Aristotle offered. But Aristotle didn't stop with ethics. He looked at politics too, asking how societies should be organized for the good of the people. In his book Politics, he compared different forms of government, monarchies, oligarchies, democracies, and considered which might be most just. He was fascinated by balance. For Aristotle, The best society was one that encouraged virtue among its citizens, where people had the freedom and education to cultivate their character, yet also maintained order and fairness. It's a surprisingly modern idea, showing how deeply his thinking resonates even today. And then there's his work in logic, which really changed the way humans think. Aristotle developed systems of reasoning, including the famous syllogism, a way of connecting ideas to reach conclusions. Imagine this simple example. All humans are mortal. Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal. It sounds obvious now, but Aristotle formalized this process, giving humans a tool to reason clearly and systematically. Logic in his hands became a way to cut through confusion, to see clearly, and to argue effectively, a tool that philosophers, scientists, and even lawyers still use today. Aristotle also loved to categorize the natural world. He studied animals and plants meticulously, observing their habits, their forms, and their functions. He tried to map out the relationships between species, and although some of his ideas were later proven wrong, the method mattered more than the mistakes. Observing carefully, documenting thoroughly, and thinking systematically, this approach laid the groundwork for modern science. Without Aristotle, the scientific method might look very different today. One of the remarkable things about Aristotle is how practical he was. While Plato dreamed of ideal worlds and Socrates questioned endlessly, Aristotle tried to connect ideas to real life. Ethics wasn't just theory, it was daily practice. Politics wasn't abstract, it was about organizing society. Science wasn't philosophical musings, it was observation and categorization. He bridged imagination and reality, showing that philosophy could guide action, not just reflection. Of course, Aristotle had a sense of humor too, though it might be subtle. He sometimes poked fun at extremes, like people who pursue pleasure alone or rigid thinkers who refuse to adapt. You can almost picture him smirking at someone being absurdly stubborn and thinking, well, that won't lead anywhere good, will it? That gentle, observational humor makes his writing feel alive, approachable, even relatable across millennia. Aristotle's influence spread far and wide. His ideas traveled to Rome, through the Islamic world, and into the European Middle Ages. Scholars studied his works for centuries, using his logic, ethics, and natural philosophy to guide thought and learning. Even today, classrooms, legal systems, and scientific practices carry the fingerprints of his mind. It's amazing to think that a man walking through fields, watching birds and taking notes, could shape how we reason about the world thousands of years later. And yet, Aristotle wasn't just about cataloguing knowledge. He was about curiosity. He believed that humans are naturally curious beings, and that curiosity drives learning and growth. He encouraged exploration, observation, and reasoning, not just accepting what people told you or what seemed convenient. He reminds us that the world is rich with questions, and it's our job to notice, ask, and explore them. Imagine walking alongside Aristotle now. You see him pointing out patterns in the clouds, counting leaves on a tree, debating with students about the nature of virtue, and perhaps laughing quietly at human folly. You can feel the energy of a mind fully engaged with the world, curious about everything, yet grounded, practical, and thoughtful. There's a rhythm to his thinking, a balance between imagination and observation, questioning and understanding, dreaming and doing. And here's a thought to carry with you. Aristotle shows that philosophy doesn't have to be abstract or distant. It's alive in our daily actions, in how we choose to behave, in how we organize our communities, in how we reason about the world. Philosophy is not something to be feared or overcomplicated. It's a guide, a companion, a way to see the extraordinary in ordinary life. So, as we slowly step away from Aristotle's gardens, his careful observations, and his detailed classifications, we begin to see a larger picture. Greek philosophy, from the early thinkers to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, forms a tapestry, a story of curiosity, questioning, imagination, and observation. Each thinker adds a thread, each idea a colour, weaving a world that continues to influence us in ways we often don't notice. And as we move forward, we'll explore other early philosophers, the pre-Socratics, and the minds who questioned the cosmos itself. They might not be household names like Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle, but their ideas laid the foundation for everything we've explored so far. From rivers in flux to unchanging reality, they dared to ask questions about the universe, change, and permanence, questions that still echo in our minds today. With Aristotle's careful reasoning as our guide, we can appreciate how Greek philosophy evolved. Observation and imagination, logic and ethics, practical life and lofty dreams, all intertwining, preparing the stage for the next chapters of thought that would ripple through history, shaping how humans perceive the world, themselves, and the pursuit of wisdom. As we walk away from Aristotle's gardens and his careful observations, let's turn our gaze even further back to the minds that first dared to ask questions about the universe itself. These were the pre-Socratic thinkers, philosophers who lived before Socrates, dreaming and wondering about the cosmos in ways that might feel surprisingly modern. They weren't just curious about ethics or politics. They were curious about everything. What the world is made of, why it changes, and whether there's some underlying order to the chaos. Picture a small Greek town, maybe near the coast, with waves gently lapping against the shore. A young philosopher sits on a rock, watching the sea, wondering what it's made of. That philosopher could be Thales, who we met briefly before, saying, "Water is the source of all things." Maybe it's not exactly true in a scientific sense, but the idea is brilliant in its simplicity. Try to find a single principle that explains the diversity of life and matter around you. Thales was looking for patterns, for something consistent beneath the constant motion of the world. Then there's Anaximander, who suggested that the universe comes from the epeiron, the boundless, an infinite source beyond ordinary perception. Imagine staring at the night sky and thinking, everything I see comes from something I can't even see. That's a pretty bold thought for a society that relied on myths to explain thunderstorms and earthquakes. Anaximander's curiosity laid the groundwork for science and astronomy centuries later, showing that even abstract thinking can lead to tangible discovery. Heraclitus, on the other hand, was obsessed with change. He famously said, "Everything flows, and you cannot step into the same river twice." Imagine walking beside a river and realizing that the water, the stones, even your reflection are constantly shifting. Heraclitus saw life itself as a dynamic process, always in motion, never static. It's almost poetic, and it's also deeply practical. If everything is changing, then wisdom lies in understanding the patterns of change. not clinging to illusions of permanence. But not everyone agreed. Parmenides took the opposite approach, insisting that change is an illusion, that reality is unchanging and eternal. It's easy to picture a debate between Heraclitus and Parmenides, one waving his arms, pointing to the flowing river, shouting, "Look, everything is moving," while the other calmly shakes his head. "No, you're mistaken. Reality is one, permanent, unchanging." Both perspectives are fascinating. Both push us to think differently, and both reflect the human urge to make sense of the universe. These early thinkers were trying to answer questions that go beyond what we see, beyond what we touch. They were asking about the building blocks of existence, the principles that govern the cosmos, and the nature of reality itself. And in doing so, they were inventing philosophy. Their approach was radical. Instead of relying solely on stories or gods, they used reason, observation, and argument. They were the first to suggest that humans could understand the world through thought and inquiry. Some pre-Socratics, like the Pythagoreans, even explored numbers and mathematics as the key to understanding reality. They looked at harmony, proportion, and geometry, believing that numbers weren't just symbols. They were the very fabric of the universe. Imagine listening to a Pythagorean explaining that music, planets, and even the structure of life itself could be understood mathematically. It sounds almost mystical, but it's also incredibly logical. Mathematics, as a universal language, is still something we rely on today, from science to architecture to computer programming. And then there were thinkers like Empedocles, who proposed that everything in the world is made up of 4 basic elements: earth, air, fire, and water. You've probably heard of this idea before. While not scientifically accurate by modern standards, it's a brilliant early attempt to categorize reality, to bring order to what seems chaotic. Empedocles also had ideas about love and strife as forces that drive change, blending physical observation with philosophical speculation. It's both poetic and practical, showing how early philosophy often mixed science, ethics, and human reflection into one. What's remarkable about the pre-Socratic thinkers is that they were experimenting with ideas, not conclusions. They were planting seeds of thought that would grow for centuries. Even if some of their theories were wrong by modern standards, the process, the curiosity, the questioning, the willingness to imagine something beyond the obvious is what matters most. And that spirit of exploration is still alive today in science, philosophy, and even everyday problem solving. Imagine walking with these philosophers along the coast, watching waves crash, clouds drift, and stars appear one by one in the night sky. They are talking about the cosmos as if it were a living puzzle, pieces scattered and waiting to be understood. Some ideas are bold, some abstract, some poetic, but all of them invite you to think, to question, and to see the world in a new way. You can almost feel the excitement, the joy of discovery, the thrill of being part of the first human attempts to understand everything around them. And there's a subtle humour here too. Some pre-Socratics had quirks, like Diogenes of Apollonia, who reportedly carried water around as a symbol of life, or Anaxagoras, who was so obsessed with the nous, or mind, that he claimed it ruled the cosmos. It's easy to picture them as eccentric, even a little dramatic, but that's part of the charm. Philosophy often starts with a little eccentricity, a willingness to think differently, to notice what others overlook, and to follow curiosity wherever it leads. So, as we leave the pre-Socratics behind, we can see a pattern emerging. Philosophy began with wonder, questions about the universe, life, and change. Then Socrates focused on ethics, on asking questions about human behavior and self-knowledge. Plato took those ideas and imagined ideal worlds, perfect forms, and the structure of society. Aristotle brought observation, logic, and practical reasoning to the table, grounding ideas in the real world. And through it all, the questions of the pre-Socratics echo in the background, reminding us that curiosity is the first step toward wisdom. The beauty of Greek philosophy is that it is not static. It flows, it grows, it evolves. Each thinker adds a layer, each question sparks another. And as we continue our journey, we'll explore ideas about ethics and the good life, the human quest for virtue, happiness, and meaning. These questions may not tell us exactly how to live, but they guide us gently, helping us reflect, consider, and perhaps make life a little richer. So, take a deep breath and imagine standing on the edge of the cosmos with the pre-Socratics. Feel the wind, watch the stars, notice the waves, and let your mind wander. Ask your own questions quietly, like a whisper to the universe. What is the essence of life? What drives change? What is truly real? These are not just ancient questions. They are invitations to explore, to think, and to grow. And now, with curiosity as our guide, we drift naturally from the cosmos into the heart of human experience, ethics, and the good life. How should we live? What is virtue? What is happiness? These questions, inspired by the philosophers we've met so far, lead us into the next chapter of reflection and understanding. A chapter where philosophy meets everyday life in a gentle, guiding way. Now that we've wandered through the cosmos with the pre-Socratics, observing the world with Aristotle, and imagining Plato's ideal forms, it's time to bring philosophy a little closer to home, to our daily lives, our choices, and our pursuit of happiness. This is the realm of ethics, the study of how we should live, what makes actions right or wrong, and what it means to live a good life. And don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. In fact, it can be surprisingly comforting, like a gentle guide reminding us that thoughtfulness matters, even in small ways. Let's start with Socrates again, because he loved ethics more than almost anything else. He believed that the unexamined life was not worth living, which is a fancy way of saying, think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and whether it matters. He didn't give easy answers. Instead, he asked questions that nudged people to reflect on their actions and beliefs. Should you lie to protect a friend? Should you obey an unjust law? What does it mean to be brave or just? These questions might feel familiar because they're still the kinds of dilemmas we face every day. Even if our challenges now involve emails, traffic, or social media debates rather than city-states. Then there's Aristotle, who approached ethics with a practical eye. He believed that living well is about developing virtue, which are good habits that shape who we are. Courage, honesty, generosity, patience. These are not just ideas to admire, they're practices to cultivate. Aristotle called this concept the golden mean, the balance between extremes. For example, courage lies between cowardice and recklessness, generosity between stinginess and extravagance. Life isn't about perfection, he suggested, but about finding the balance that helps us thrive as humans. It's a gentle reminder that being virtuous doesn't require heroic feats every day. It can be as simple as choosing honesty over convenience, patience over frustration, or kindness over indifference. Plato, meanwhile, added a layer of reflection on society. In his ideal city, justice and virtue were intertwined. Everyone had a role, and living well meant contributing to the common good. But the lesson applies to us too. Even if we don't live in Plato's imagined city, ethics encourages us to think about our relationships, our communities, and the impact of our actions. Being ethical isn't just personal, it's social. It's about understanding that our choices ripple outward, affecting others in ways we may not immediately see. And here's where it gets interesting. Ethics isn't just about rules or moral codes. It's also about happiness, or what Aristotle called eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or living well. True happiness, he argued, comes from cultivating virtue, exercising reason, and engaging with life meaningfully. It's not fleeting pleasure or indulgence. It's the satisfaction of living in harmony with your best self. Imagine waking up each day, not just surviving, but actively shaping your character, making thoughtful choices, and building a life that feels coherent and satisfying. That's what the Greeks meant by the good life. Stoicism, another ethical philosophy that arose later but drew inspiration from these earlier thinkers, brings a practical twist. Stoics like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius emphasize control over our responses, not external events. You can't always control what happens, but you can control how you respond. If someone cuts you off in traffic, you can choose irritation or patience. If life throws a challenge your way, you can choose despair or resilience. Stoicism teaches that virtue and calm are within reach, even when the world is unpredictable. It's like philosophy as a toolkit for everyday life, helping us navigate challenges with grace. And then there's Epicureanism, which sometimes gets misunderstood as indulgence in pleasure. In reality, Epicurus argued that the good life is about simple, sustainable pleasures, freedom from fear, and cultivating friendships. It's not about endless indulgence, but about finding joy in small, meaningful moments. A conversation with a friend, a meal shared, the quiet comfort of a sunset. In a way, it's the philosophical equivalent of telling yourself, slow down, enjoy this. It matters more than you think. Ethics also teaches us about reflection and self-awareness. Asking questions like, why did I act this way? Or, what do I truly value? Encourages mindfulness, a calm observation of our own thoughts and behaviors. It's not judgment, it's understanding. Like a gentle mirror held up to our lives, philosophy invites us to see clearly, to notice patterns, and to adjust course when needed. And humour has its place too. Imagine Socrates poking fun at human stubbornness, or Aristotle lightly teasing someone for extreme behaviour. Philosophy isn't meant to be grim or rigid. It's a conversation, sometimes playful, sometimes challenging, but always guiding us toward better understanding and more thoughtful action. In ethics, laughter often comes from recognizing our own follies, learning from mistakes, and finding balance without being harsh on ourselves. As we consider these ethical systems, one thing becomes clear. Greek philosophy isn't just abstract ideas. It's a map for living, offering guidance for thought, action, and reflection. Whether through Socratic questioning, Aristotelian virtue, Platonic justice, Stoic resilience, or Epicurean moderation, these philosophies provide tools to navigate life with intention, curiosity, and care. They remind us that living well isn't about perfection. It's about engagement, reflection, and thoughtful choices. So as you settle into this moment, think about your own life. What choices have shaped you? Which habits bring you closer to the person you want to be? Which actions ripple outward into your community? Ethics isn't a lecture. It's an invitation, a quiet, gentle encouragement to live consciously, to examine our lives, and to aim for flourishing, not just survival. And as we drift from ethics into the next chapter, imagine how these ideas connect to the bigger questions that fascinated the Greeks: justice, politics, and the role of society in shaping human character. Ethics naturally flows into discussions about leadership, governance, and the ideal structures that support a good life. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle laid the groundwork, but thinkers across history have built on these foundations, asking not just how individuals should live, but how communities can flourish together. So, with the gentle reminder that philosophy is a guide, a companion, and a tool for understanding life, we leave this chapter and move forward into discussions of justice, virtue, and society. The ideas that shaped not just individuals, but the civilizations that followed. And as always, we carry with us the timeless question: what does it mean to live well? Having reflected on ethics and the good life, let's widen our lens a little. Life isn't just about individual choices. It's about communities, cities, and societies. How should people live together? How do we build systems that encourage virtue, fairness, and flourishing? These were the questions that consumed Greek philosophers as much as the nature of reality or the pursuit of happiness. And as we explore justice and politics, we see philosophy stepping off the page and into the streets, marketplaces, and city councils of Athens and beyond. Plato, whom we met in the last chapter, had strong ideas about justice. In his famous work, The Republic, he imagined an ideal city, a society organized to reflect virtue and harmony. Picture this city in your mind: rulers who are philosophers, wise and thoughtful, making decisions guided by reason, soldiers protecting the city and upholding courage, and workers producing goods and services, keeping the city functioning smoothly. Everyone has a role, and justice, for Plato, means each part doing what it's meant to do without overstepping. In other words, justice isn't just fairness in a superficial sense. It's a kind of cosmic balance in society. Now, Plato's ideal city might sound a little rigid, like a philosophical assembly line, but there's wisdom in the underlying principle. A well-ordered society requires roles, responsibilities, and structures that allow individuals and communities to thrive. Even if we don't live in Plato's perfect city, his ideas encourage us to think about fairness, leadership, and how society shapes our lives. Imagine living in a community where everyone considered how their actions affected the whole. How different might life feel? Aristotle, Plato's student, approached politics in a more practical, observational way. While Plato imagined ideal forms, Aristotle examined real cities, comparing governments, laws, and constitutions. He categorized political systems, monarchies, aristocracies, and democracies, each with a good form and a corrupt version. For instance, a monarchy can become tyranny if the ruler seeks personal gain rather than the common good. Aristotle believed that the best governments are those that promote virtue and enable citizens to live well. It's not perfection he sought. It's balance, stability, and opportunity for people to flourish. And here's a thought that feels surprisingly modern. Aristotle argued that citizens have responsibilities too. Politics isn't just about rulers. It's about active participation. Being part of a community means contributing, learning, and cultivating virtues that benefit not just ourselves, but others. Think about voting, volunteering, or even just being a thoughtful neighbour. Aristotle's philosophy reminds us that a good society requires engaged, reflective citizens, not just wise leaders. But Greek thought on politics wasn't limited to Plato and Aristotle. Socrates, in his probing way, encouraged people to question authority, challenge assumptions, and think critically about laws and governance. His approach wasn't about overthrowing governments. It was about awakening minds. A society works best when its citizens can think, reason, and act with justice and virtue. Even today, that idea resonates. Healthy communities rely on informed, reflective people. Justice itself was a central theme. The Greeks wrestled with questions that are still relevant. What is fair? Should punishment fit the crime? How do we balance individual freedom with the common good? These aren't abstract exercises. They are the questions that shape law, morality, and everyday life. Imagine a city where leaders never considered fairness, where laws were arbitrary, or where people didn't reflect on their actions. Life would be chaotic. Philosophy, in this sense, was a way to bring order, reason, and reflection into the human experiment of society. And there's a subtle humour in Greek political philosophy too. Thinkers like Plato imagined philosopher kings ruling with wisdom, but also perhaps silently rolling their eyes at the messy realities of human behaviour. Aristotle catalogued governments with the precision of a meticulous gardener, noting which systems thrived and which decayed. You can almost hear the gentle sigh as he observes citizens squabbling over trivial matters, thinking, if only they understood the golden mean. Philosophy isn't grim. It's a playful, patient reflection on human life. Greek political thought also introduced the idea of public virtue, the sense that the health of a society depends on the character of its citizens. Laws alone are not enough. People must cultivate honesty, courage, and justice in daily life. Plato and Aristotle understood that individuals and society are intertwined, like threads in a tapestry. Pull one thread too harshly, and the fabric frays. Nurture the threads, and the whole pattern shines. It's a poetic way to think about responsibility, community, and ethical living. And yet, Greek philosophers were also realists. They acknowledged that humans are imperfect, that societies have conflicts, and that governance is messy. Tyrants arise, citizens quarrel, mistakes happen. But the key is reflection, observing patterns, learning from errors, and striving to improve. Politics, for the Greeks, wasn't just rules and power. It was a moral and intellectual exercise, a chance to practice virtue on a larger scale. We can carry these ideas into our modern lives too. Consider neighbourhoods, workplaces, or online communities. Justice, ethics, and thoughtful participation matter, even on a small scale. Our actions ripple outward, affecting others in ways we often underestimate. Greek philosophy invites us to see beyond our own perspective, to consider the well-being of the whole, and to act with reason, care, and virtue. Imagine walking with Aristotle and Plato through the agora, the bustling marketplace, observing debates, listening to speeches, and watching citizens engage with ideas. The city is alive, chaotic, sometimes frustrating, but also full of possibility. Philosophy here is not just contemplation. It's active, practical, and deeply human. It's about shaping the society we live in while cultivating ourselves along the way. So, as we leave the streets of Athens behind, we carry with us the lessons of justice and politics, reflection, virtue, balance, and participation. Ethics guides the individual, while philosophy guides the community. Together, they create a vision of human life that's thoughtful, engaged, and meaningful. And just like the questions about the cosmos or the nature of virtue, these questions about society are not solved once and for all. They continue to inspire thought, debate, and action even today. As we gently move forward, our next chapter takes us into another timeless topic: love, friendship, and the human heart. Ethics and politics guide life and society, but human connections, the bonds that shape our emotions and choices, bring philosophy into the most personal, intimate corners of experience. From the dialogues of Plato to the reflections of Aristotle, Greek thinkers explored friendship, desire, and love with care, offering wisdom that still resonates in our relationships today. So, with justice and politics as our compass, let's turn toward the heart, where philosophy meets emotion, connection, and the subtle art of living well with others. Now that we've wandered through ethics, politics, and the pursuit of the good life, it's time to turn inward, to the intimate, personal, and sometimes messy world of the human heart. Greek philosophers didn't just study the cosmos, society, or abstract ideals. They were fascinated by relationships, love, and friendship. After all, life isn't just about thinking well or living ethically. It's also about connecting, caring, and feeling. And in their writings, we find reflections that are surprisingly relatable, even thousands of years later. Let's start with Aristotle, who had a lot to say about friendship. He didn't just think friendship was nice, it was essential for a flourishing life. Aristotle divided friendships into 3 types. First, there are friendships of utility, where people connect because it benefits them, like 2 merchants forming a partnership. Practical, useful, but not deep. Then there are friendships of pleasure, where people enjoy each other's company, like sharing a laugh over a good meal or a funny story. These are enjoyable, but sometimes fleeting. And finally, there are friendships of virtue, the highest kind. These relationships are rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and a shared commitment to growing as a person. These friends help each other become better humans, offering support, challenge, and understanding. Aristotle believed that without such connections, life is incomplete. It's a reminder that relationships aren't just emotional, they're essential to our character and well-being. Plato approached love and friendship a bit differently, often through the lens of ideas and the soul. In works like the Symposium, he explored Platonic love, the idea that love can transcend the physical and become a pursuit of the beauty, truth, and virtue itself. Imagine being inspired by someone's mind, values, or creativity, not just their appearance. Love, for Plato, was a path toward understanding higher truths, a way of connecting with something eternal and meaningful. It's not a rejection of passion or romance, but a recognition that human relationships can elevate our thinking and spirit. And then there's the Stoics, who offered a practical and sometimes funny perspective on relationships. They suggested that while emotions are natural, we should cultivate a sense of inner calm and self-control, even in love. Think of a Stoic watching their friend accidentally spill wine at dinner, sighing quietly and thinking, "It's okay, the universe isn't ending." They valued rationality, patience, and perspective in human connections, reminding us that relationships flourish when we balance emotion with understanding. Epicurus, too, emphasized friendship, often placing it above romantic love. He saw friends as the source of security, joy, and simple pleasures in life. Imagine a quiet afternoon spent sharing stories, laughing together, or enjoying a meal. Small, ordinary moments made extraordinary by the bonds we share. Epicurus reminds us that love isn't only grand gestures or intense passion. It's in the everyday care and companionship that makes life meaningful. Greek philosophy also explored the connection between love and ethics. Plato, Aristotle, and others suggested that relationships reflect our values. The friends we choose, the partners we love, and the way we treat others reveal our character. This makes friendship both a mirror and a guide, showing us who we are and helping us grow into better versions of ourselves. Think about someone who challenges you kindly, encourages reflection, or supports your goals. They're doing more than being a friend. They're shaping your moral and emotional life. And humor, as always, sneaks in quietly. Imagine Plato musing on love, getting carried away with ideal forms, while a friend rolls their eyes, whispering, "Just say you like them, Plato." Or Aristotle, patiently categorizing types of friends, while a companion grumbles about having too many friends of utility. Philosophy isn't distant. It's playful, human, and often gently self-aware. Love and friendship also extend to communities. The Greeks believed that the health of society depends not just on laws or rulers, but on the quality of relationships among citizens. Justice, ethics, and friendship intertwine. Virtuous citizens who respect, care for, and challenge each other create communities that flourish. It's a reminder that our connections ripple outward, shaping not only our lives, but also the larger world around us. Consider the idea of mentorship too, which the Greeks valued deeply. Socrates and Plato, for example, were part of long chains of teaching and learning. Mentors guided students not just with knowledge, but with example, encouragement, and challenge. Friendship, love, and mentorship often overlapped, blending care, growth, and reflection. It's a dynamic interplay that reminds us relationships are as much about giving as receiving, as much about growth as comfort. Greek thinkers were also unafraid to explore the more complicated sides of love. Desire, jealousy, and unfulfilled longing appear in their dialogues, sometimes with humor, sometimes with gravity. They recognize that human emotions are complex, unpredictable, and sometimes messy. But even in these complexities, philosophy offered guidance. Observe carefully, reflect thoughtfully, and cultivate virtues that support good relationships. In other words, navigate the heart with awareness, not blind impulse. And this brings us to a gentle reminder for us today. Relationships are one of the deepest ways philosophy comes alive. Ethics, virtue, and reflection aren't abstract. They unfold in our connections with others. Love and friendship teach patience, courage, honesty, and care. They challenge us, inspire us, and sometimes frustrate us, but always they offer opportunities for growth. Like walking beside Aristotle in the garden, observing, learning, and reflecting. We learn from the people in our lives how to become better, more thoughtful, and more compassionate. So, as we leave the intimate corners of the heart, carrying reflections on friendship, love, and human connection, we can begin to see the larger picture of Greek philosophy. It's a tapestry of curiosity, ethics, politics, observation, imagination, and human emotion. Each thinker, from the pre-Socratics to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, adds threads that weave together reason, virtue, and care. And even as we explore cosmic questions or societal structures, the human heart remains central, the place where philosophy meets life most directly. Our journey doesn't end here, of course. Love and friendship are deeply tied to questions of happiness, purpose, and meaning. And in the next chapters, we'll explore how these ideas intersect with knowledge, the pursuit of wisdom, and the ultimate goal of human life. Philosophy is not a series of isolated lessons. It's a flowing conversation, an exploration that stretches from the stars to the soul, from politics to personal growth, from logic to love. So, as we gently move forward, imagine sitting quietly with a close friend or mentor, reflecting on life, sharing stories, and learning from each other. That, in many ways, captures the essence of Greek philosophy. A dialogue, a shared journey, and a gentle guidance toward living thoughtfully, wisely, and well. As we leave the warmth of friendship and the complexities of the human heart behind, let's shift our gaze outward and upward toward the eternal human quest for knowledge, wisdom, and truth. Greek philosophers were obsessed with understanding reality, not just in ethics or politics, but in the very nature of knowing. What can we truly know? How do we know it? And perhaps most importantly, how does knowledge shape the way we live? These questions are the heartbeat of philosophy, guiding thought from Socrates to Aristotle and beyond. Socrates, who we've walked with before, believed that wisdom begins with humility, the recognition that we know very little. It sounds almost counterintuitive. How can admitting ignorance lead to wisdom? But Socrates argued that acknowledging our limitations opens the door to true inquiry. By questioning, exploring, and reflecting, we approach a deeper understanding. Imagine sitting in an Athenian marketplace, watching Socrates gently prod citizens with questions like, "What is justice?" or "What is virtue?" At first, it might seem frustrating. He rarely gave answers, but the process itself awakens curiosity and insight. Plato expanded on this idea in his theory of knowledge, especially in the famous allegory of the cave. Picture people chained in a dark cave, seeing only shadows of objects projected on the wall. They believe the shadows are reality because that's all they've ever seen. One prisoner escapes and sees the sun, realizing that the shadows were just illusions. Plato used this story to illustrate the journey from ignorance to knowledge, from illusion to truth. It's a gentle reminder that our perceptions are limited, that reality is often richer than what first meets the eye, and that learning requires effort, reflection, and sometimes stepping outside our comfort zone. And then there's Aristotle, who approached knowledge in a more practical, systematic way. He believed that careful observation, reasoning, and categorization could bring us closer to understanding. Science, logic, ethics, and politics. All these areas benefit from methodical study. Aristotle taught that knowledge isn't just an abstract ideal. It's a tool for living, for making sense of the world, and for acting wisely within it. Imagine Aristotle examining plants, animals, and human behavior, meticulously noting patterns and relationships. He shows us that curiosity, combined with careful thought, is the path to insight. The Greeks also wrestled with the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is often about facts, observation, or technical skill. Wisdom, on the other hand, is about understanding how to live well, how to make good decisions, and how to act virtuously. Think of knowledge as the map and wisdom as the guide who shows you how to navigate the terrain. One without the other can leave you lost or misled. Greek philosophers sought both, the clarity of understanding and the insight to apply it meaningfully. Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates all valued dialogue as a path to wisdom. Talking, questioning, and reasoning with others isn't just an academic exercise. It's a way to refine thought, uncover assumptions, and explore new perspectives. Imagine sitting with a friend or mentor, debating gently, exploring ideas, and occasionally laughing at your own misunderstandings. Philosophy becomes not just an intellectual pursuit, but a shared journey, a conversation that shapes both minds and hearts. Epistemology, the study of knowledge itself, emerged from these explorations. The Greeks asked, what is certainty? How do we distinguish belief from truth? They challenged assumptions, tested ideas, and encouraged skepticism, not in a cynical way, but as a tool to refine understanding. This skepticism doesn't paralyze, it sharpens. It teaches careful observation, critical thinking, and openness to new perspectives. Imagine applying this mindset to your own life, noticing assumptions you've long accepted, questioning them, and discovering a richer, more nuanced understanding of the world. Greek philosophy also recognized the limits of human understanding. Even Aristotle admitted that while we can know a great deal, some mysteries remain beyond our grasp. The stars, the cosmos, the nature of the divine, these questions may never be fully answered. And that's okay. Philosophy teaches that the pursuit of knowledge itself is valuable, even if the ultimate truth remains elusive. It's a reminder to stay curious, patient, and humble. After all, the journey of learning is as important as the destination. There's also a gentle humor in the pursuit of truth. Imagine a philosopher debating endlessly over definitions, carefully untangling words, while someone walks by thinking, can't you just get on with life? Philosophy isn't always practical. It's reflective, deliberate, and sometimes delightfully pedantic. But in that slow, careful thinking, we find clarity, perspective, and a deeper appreciation for the world. It's a practice of mindfulness applied to ideas, a meditation on reality itself. And knowledge, wisdom, and the pursuit of truth aren't just intellectual exercises. They guide our actions, relationships, and decisions. How we understand the world shapes how we act in it. Ethics, politics, and friendship are informed by our understanding of reality. Love and virtue, justice and curiosity, they all intersect with knowledge. Philosophy teaches us that learning and living are inseparable, that reflection is not an escape from life, but a way to engage with it more fully. Imagine walking through a library of the mind, filled with dialogues, treatises, and reflections from centuries past. Each text is a conversation across time an invitation to explore, question, and grow. Greek philosophy encourages us to enter that library, take a deep breath, and wander freely, observing, reflecting, and engaging with ideas that continue to shape human thought. So, as we gently drift from the world of knowledge and wisdom, we carry a few lessons. Curiosity is essential. Humility in understanding is wise. Dialogue is invaluable. And the pursuit of truth is as much about the journey as the destination. Philosophy invites us to see more clearly, think more carefully, and live more thoughtfully. And even as we explore new chapters, we remember that every question, every reflection, and every conversation contributes to the ongoing story of human understanding. In the next chapter, we'll explore the natural world and science, the Greeks' early attempts to understand nature, biology, and the cosmos in ways that blend observation, wonder, and imagination. From Thales' water to Aristotle's meticulous classifications, the curiosity that drives knowledge also shapes the study of the physical world, linking mind and matter in the grand tapestry of thought. So take a moment, breathe, and let your mind wander. Consider the questions you've asked, the ideas that have sparked curiosity, and the gentle realization that wisdom is a lifelong pursuit, a journey as vast and rich as the cosmos itself. As we leave the pursuit of wisdom and truth behind, let's turn our attention to the world around us. The rivers, trees, stars, and creatures that populate the cosmos. Greek philosophers weren't just thinkers about ethics, society, or love. They were also curious observers of nature. Long before modern science, they were trying to make sense of the natural world, blending observation, imagination, and logic in ways that laid the foundation for centuries of discovery. Let's start with Thales again, who we first met as a philosopher of water. He looked at the world and asked, "What is everything made of?" His answer, water, might seem simple or even amusing, but it represents something revolutionary, the search for underlying principles in nature. Thales didn't rely solely on myths or stories. He observed, hypothesized, and thought systematically about the elements that compose the world. Imagine sitting by the shore, watching waves lap the sand, and realizing that this simple substance could explain the universe itself. That's curiosity in its purest form. Anaximander, his student, took this a step further with his idea of the apeiron, the boundless or infinite source from which all things emerge. He wasn't just asking about water or fire. He was imagining a principle beyond ordinary perception, something that explains creation, change, and life itself. This abstract thinking might sound mystical, but it's also surprisingly scientific. It's the same impulse that drives modern physicists to search for fundamental particles or hidden forces behind reality. Then there's Empedocles, who introduced the idea that everything is made of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and water. While not accurate in the modern sense, it was an early attempt to categorize and systematize the natural world. Empedocles also considered forces like love and strife as drivers of change, blending observation with speculation. It's poetic, yes, but it also shows that early science wasn't separated from philosophy. It was an integrated exploration of both matter and meaning. Aristotle, of course, takes center stage here. He approached the natural world with a meticulous eye, cataloguing plants, animals, and phenomena with a level of detail that would astonish even modern biologists. He wasn't satisfied with just guessing. He observed, described, and classified, seeking patterns that explain life's diversity. His system of classification, dividing animals by traits, habitats, and behavior, was revolutionary. Imagine Aristotle crouched in a forest, examining insects, noting their features, and reflecting on how they fit into the greater order of life. His careful observation demonstrates a key principle. Knowledge begins with seeing, noticing, and understanding the details around us. Greek philosophers also explored astronomy and cosmology. They looked up at the night sky and wondered not just about the stars, but about their motions, distances, and relationships. Anaxagoras suggested that the sun was a fiery stone, the moon reflected sunlight, and eclipses were natural phenomena, not mystical omens. Pythagoras and later thinkers sought mathematical harmony in the heavens, noticing patterns in planetary motion and celestial cycles. They were blending observation with reason, imagination with calculation, creating an early framework for understanding the cosmos scientifically. Even medicine and biology received attention. Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, insisted on observation, diagnosis, and natural explanations for disease. He moved away from supernatural explanations and emphasized the body's balance, the effects of diet, environment, and lifestyle. It's a reminder that Greek thought was practical as well as theoretical, aiming to improve human life through understanding, not just speculation. What's remarkable is how integrated these ideas were. Ethics, politics, knowledge, love, and natural science weren't separate compartments. They all informed each other. Observing the natural world shaped ideas about cause and effect, reasoning, and classification, which in turn influenced ethics and philosophy. Science wasn't just about understanding rocks or stars. It was about understanding life itself, humanity's place in the cosmos, and the principles that govern reality. And there's a subtle humor in their methods too. Imagine Empedocles claiming everything comes from 4 elements, while a friend rolls their eyes, muttering, "Sure, everything's fire and water. Okay." Or Aristotle carefully counting animal traits, while insects crawl over his notes, oblivious. Philosophy and early science weren't always neat. They were experimental, human, and often a little messy. But that's exactly what makes the discovery so alive. Observation and curiosity remain central. The Greeks teach us that understanding the natural world starts with noticing, questioning, and reflecting. Even simple acts, watching a river flow, noticing bird behavior, observing the stars, can spark profound insights. And in a gentle way, this approach invites us to see the world more deeply, to move slowly, to pay attention, and to marvel at the intricate patterns that surround us. Greek natural philosophy also introduced the idea of causality, the understanding that events have reasons and relationships. Why does rain fall? Why do seasons change? Why do plants grow toward light? These thinkers sought explanations grounded in observation and logic, a precursor to modern scientific methodology. It's a subtle reminder that inquiry is a practice, a daily habit of noticing, asking, and testing ideas, not just memorizing facts. And like all philosophy, the study of nature connects back to human life. Observing patterns in nature informs ethics, politics, and our understanding of ourselves. life and the world are interconnected. Learning about the stars, animals, and elements is also learning about our place in the universe. Knowledge, observation, and reflection become tools for living wisely, not just for thinking abstractly. So, as we leave the forests, rivers, and night skies behind, we carry forward a new awareness. Greek philosophers laid the foundation for science, not by seeking ultimate answers, but by nurturing curiosity, observation, and critical thinking. They remind us that learning is an ongoing journey, and that understanding the world, whether through ethics, love, politics, or natural science, enriches the way we live. Our next chapter flows naturally from this curiosity about the world into metaphysics and the nature of reality, the deeper questions about existence, the unseen, and the ultimate principles that govern everything, from atoms and elements to the cosmos and the mind. The Greeks were exploring the frontiers of thought that continue to inspire curiosity today. So, take a moment and look around you. Notice the leaves, the sky, the light on the wall, or the sound of a passing car. Observe quietly, reflect gently, and remember that philosophy begins with curiosity, grounded in the world and expressed through thoughtful observation. The natural world is not just a backdrop. It's a partner in understanding, a teacher, and an endless source of wonder. Having explored the natural world, it's time to take another step inward and upward, toward the profound, abstract, and sometimes puzzling questions of metaphysics. If early science asks, what is this made of? Metaphysics asks, what is existence itself? It's a journey from observation to contemplation, from the tangible world of trees, rivers, and stars, to the intangible principles that underpin everything. Greek philosophers were fascinated by these questions, and their reflections continue to shape the way we think about reality, consciousness, and the universe. Plato, who we've walked with through so many philosophical landscapes, had a famous idea known as the theory of forms. Imagine every object in the world, a chair, a tree, a star, has an ideal version, a perfect form that exists beyond the physical world. The chairs we sit on are imperfect copies of the perfect chair. The trees we see are reflections of the ideal tree, and the forms themselves exist in a realm of pure eternal truth. Plato used this to explain why we can recognize beauty, justice, or goodness, even when the world seems flawed. It's almost like saying, we see the shadows, but the real shapes are up there, in a perfect, invisible realm. It's a little mind-bending, yes, but it's also comforting. The universe has order, patterns, and ideals, even when life feels messy. Aristotle, Plato's student, approached metaphysics differently. He wasn't content with distant, unseen ideals. He focused on substance, causality, and change in the tangible world. Aristotle asked, what makes something what it is? And why does it change? He introduced concepts like potentiality and actuality, the idea that things have the potential to become something more, and that reality unfolds as they achieve that potential. Think of a seed growing into a tree. The tree was always potential within the seed, and through time and the right conditions, it becomes actual. Aristotle's metaphysics grounds abstract questions in observable reality, blending contemplation with practical insight. The pre-Socratics had their own metaphysical inquiries too. Thales' claim that water is the underlying principle of everything isn't just chemistry. It's a metaphysical statement about unity and substance. Anaximander's Apeiron, the boundless source, is a poetic reflection on infinity, origins, and the ultimate nature of existence, even if their ideas seem simplistic by today's standards. They mark the beginning of humans trying to understand the why behind the what. Metaphysics also introduces questions about the mind, consciousness, and soul. Plato suggested that the soul is immortal, temporarily inhabiting the body, and capable of knowledge beyond the physical senses. He imagined learning as a process of recollection, remembering truths the soul already knew before birth. Aristotle, in contrast, saw the soul as the form of a living being, the organizing principle that makes a body alive. In simpler terms, the soul isn't floating somewhere separately. It's what gives life, purpose, and function to an organism. These ideas still spark reflection today. What is consciousness? What is identity? What does it mean to truly exist? And then there's the subtle humor and humanity in these reflections. Imagine Plato gesturing grandly toward the forms, declaring, "Behold the perfect circle," while Aristotle calmly sketches circles in the sand, pointing out which ones are round enough for practical use. Philosophy isn't always solemn. It's playful, imaginative, and deeply human, blending wonder with curiosity. Metaphysics also encourages perspective. By contemplating what lies beneath appearances, we are reminded that life is often more complex than it seems. Things have layers, causes, and connections that may not be immediately visible. A simple act, a passing conversation, or a falling leaf can spark reflections about order, purpose, and reality. In this way, metaphysics becomes not just an academic pursuit, but a lens through which to experience life more deeply. Greek philosophers also connected metaphysics to ethics and society. Understanding the ultimate nature of reality informs how we live, act, and relate to others. If the universe has patterns, order, or underlying principles, then human behavior can be aligned with them. Ethics, politics, knowledge, and metaphysics are all interwoven threads in the same tapestry. Life isn't fragmented. It's a continuum of observation, reflection, and understanding. Imagine sitting quietly under the stars, reflecting on your day, the choices you made, the people you interacted with, and the larger patterns of life. Greek metaphysics invites this kind of contemplation, not as an escape from reality, but as a deeper engagement with it. The goal isn't always to find final answers. It's to awaken curiosity, sharpen insight, and appreciate the richness of existence. And there's a gentle beauty in these ideas. The universe, Plato and Aristotle suggest, is more than chaos. It's layered, structured, and meaningful, even if the meaning isn't immediately obvious. Existence itself becomes a source of wonder, an invitation to explore, question, and reflect. It's a philosophical meditation that nudges us to notice, contemplate, and engage with life more fully. In this chapter, we see how metaphysics bridges the personal and the cosmic, from the soul and consciousness to the underlying principles of the cosmos. Greek thinkers encouraged a holistic vision of existence. Knowledge, ethics, love, politics, and observation all intersect here. Life, in all its complexity, is worthy of attention, reflection, and wonder. As we leave metaphysics for the next chapter, we carry these reflections forward into logic and reasoning, the tools the Greeks developed to navigate thought, solve problems, and explore truth systematically. Metaphysics provides the questions, logic provides the method. Together, they shape how we think, reason, and engage with both the world and our own minds. So, as you settle deeper into this moment, consider the questions you might ask about reality. What is existence? What is purpose? What is the unseen pattern beneath the surface of life? And remember, philosophy is not about rushing to answers. It's about slowing down, noticing, reflecting, and exploring the mysteries that surround us. Having explored metaphysics and the nature of reality, we now turn to the tools the Greeks developed to make sense of it all: logic and reasoning. If metaphysics asks the big what and why questions, logic asks, how do we think clearly about these things? Greek philosophers weren't just dreamers. They were systematizers. They wanted methods to reason, argue, and reach conclusions that weren't just persuasive, but reliable. Logic became the map for navigating thought, a compass guiding minds through the fog of confusion. Aristotle is the star here again. He is often called the father of logic because he formalized systems of reasoning, showing how arguments could be structured so conclusions follow naturally from premises. Imagine explaining that all humans are mortal. Socrates is a human, therefore Socrates is mortal. It seems simple, even obvious. But this clarity, this step-by-step thinking, was revolutionary. It provided a framework for distinguishing good arguments from bad, truth from error. Aristotle's work on syllogisms laid the foundation for centuries of philosophical and scientific reasoning. Logic wasn't just for academic exercises, though. It was a tool for everyday life. How do we make decisions about justice, friendship, love, or politics? How do we evaluate advice, news, or rumors? By reasoning carefully, noticing assumptions, and analyzing claims, we sharpen our minds and avoid errors that might otherwise mislead us. Think of it as mental hygiene, a daily practice of cleaning the cobwebs from thought and ensuring our conclusions are well-founded. The Greeks also explored fallacies, those sneaky errors in reasoning that can trip up even smart minds. Some are subtle, like assuming that because something is popular, it must be true, or mistaking correlation for causation. Others are obvious, like contradictions or circular reasoning. By learning to recognize these pitfalls, the Greeks taught that thinking clearly requires attention, patience, and a willingness to question even our own assumptions. Logic isn't rigid. It's a skill we cultivate, like tending a garden of thought. Socrates contributed in his own way through the Socratic method, which is still used in classrooms today. He didn't just lecture. He asked questions, guiding people to examine their beliefs and spot inconsistencies. What do you mean by justice? Can you give an example? Does that always hold true? These questions weren't traps. They were invitations to think more deeply, carefully, and honestly. In this gentle probing, logic becomes relational, conversational, and even a little playful. It's philosophy as a dialogue, a dance of ideas where discovery happens through reflection and engagement. Plato, building on Socratic methods, also emphasized reasoning, especially in understanding abstract concepts. Logic was a bridge between the physical world and the realm of forms, a tool to ascend from shadows and appearances to higher understanding. By structuring thought carefully, one could approach truth more reliably. Logic, in this sense, isn't just about arguments. It's a way to navigate reality itself, connecting mind, world, and ideals. Greek logic also emphasizes clarity of language because words are the tools of thought. Ambiguous or careless language leads to confusion, misunderstanding, and error. Philosophers paid attention to definitions, precision, and context, knowing that thought and speech are intertwined. Imagine Aristotle patiently defining terms while a friend grumbles, "Can't you just say it plainly?" The patience required is immense, but the result is clear thinking that can withstand scrutiny, a skill we still need today, especially in an age of overwhelming information. And there's subtle humour here too. Picture a philosopher debating endlessly over definitions of courage or friendship, while a passerby mutters, "Are they really going to figure this out?" Logic, while serious, has a human side. It's meticulous, occasionally pedantic, but also playful. A mental exercise in precision, curiosity, and attention. It trains the mind to notice details, connect dots, and see patterns where others might miss them. Logic also connects deeply with ethics, politics, and knowledge. Ethical reasoning, for instance, relies on clear thought. If an action harms others, violates virtue, or conflicts with justice, reasoning helps us recognize it. Political reasoning requires weighing laws, outcomes, and principles, avoiding impulsive decisions driven by emotion or bias. Even our personal relationships benefit. Logic helps us communicate clearly, resolve misunderstandings, and reflect on our own judgments. In this way, thinking clearly is not abstract, it's profoundly practical, shaping life itself. Moreover, logic fosters curiosity and humility. By questioning assumptions, examining arguments, and considering alternatives, we learn that certainty is rare and discovery is ongoing. The Greeks teach us to approach ideas carefully, to test claims, and to be patient with complexity. Mistakes aren't failures. They're opportunities to refine thought, sharpen insight, and grow intellectually. Logic is a guide, not a judgmental taskmaster. It's a way to navigate the messy, beautiful terrain of human understanding. Imagine sitting quietly with a dialogue in hand, tracing the steps of an argument, questioning each premise, testing conclusions. Logic becomes a practice, a mental meditation that sharpens insight and deepens reflection. Like the philosophers before us, we are invited to observe, question, and refine, not just for the sake of knowing, but for the sake of living thoughtfully. And that brings us to a gentle insight. Logic isn't cold or mechanical. It's deeply human. It's a way of engaging with ideas, people, and the world that cultivates patience, clarity, and discernment. When combined with ethics, metaphysics, and observation of the natural world, logic completes the toolkit for navigating life with wisdom, curiosity, and care. As we move from the art of thinking clearly, the next chapter flows naturally into the realm of legacy and influence. How Greek philosophy shaped not only their world, but the centuries that followed. From Roman thinkers to modern science and ethics, the reasoning, observation, and reflection of the Greeks continue to ripple across time. Logic may be the tool, but legacy is the echo it leaves in history, thought, and culture. So, as you settle into this moment, reflect quietly on your own thinking. How do you approach questions, decisions, or challenges? Are your conclusions careful and reasoned, or hurried and hasty? Greek logic invites patience, curiosity, and reflection, an ongoing conversation between mind, world, and self. And with that, we gently prepare to explore the enduring influence of these ideas in the next chapter. Having explored logic, reasoning, and the art of thinking clearly, let's step back and take a look at the bigger picture, the legacy and influence of Greek philosophy. These ideas weren't just for dusty scrolls in ancient Athens. They shaped centuries of human thought, from the Roman era to the Renaissance, and even our modern world. Greek philosophy is like a river, starting small with curious minds, then spreading wide, touching ethics, science, politics, and culture. And as we trace this river, we see how the questions and methods of the Greeks continue to ripple through time. Consider the Romans first. Roman thinkers like Cicero and Seneca were deeply influenced by Greek philosophy. They carried ethical concepts, ideas about justice, and the importance of virtue into political life and literature. Stoicism, in particular, traveled from Greece to Rome, guiding people on how to live with resilience, calm, and self-reflection. Imagine a Roman citizen reading Seneca's letters, taking notes, and reflecting on daily life with a philosopher's lens. It's Greek philosophy in action, practical, reflective, and timeless. Then came the Middle Ages, where Greek thought survived, often through translations and interpretations by Islamic scholars in the Arab world. Aristotle's works were preserved, studied, and expanded upon, influencing theology, ethics, and science. Plato's ideas also traveled, inspiring discussions about ideal forms, morality, and the structure of reality. Even when ideas were debated, misinterpreted, or challenged, the spark of Greek philosophy remained alive. It's a reminder that good questions endure, and wisdom travels through unexpected paths. The Renaissance was another moment when Greek philosophy reshaped the world. Thinkers like Erasmus, Machiavelli, and later Descartes rediscovered Greek texts, bringing humanism, reasoning, and critical inquiry back into European thought. Art, literature, politics, and science were infused with reflection, observation, and curiosity, echoing the spirit of Plato, Aristotle, and the pre-Socratics. It's as if the voices of ancient Athens whispered across centuries, reminding people to look closely, think deeply, and question boldly. Science, too, owes much to the Greeks. Their early observations, classifications, and insistence on reasoned explanation laid the groundwork for later thinkers like Galileo, Newton, and Darwin. Thales' curiosity about natural principles, Aristotle's meticulous cataloguing of species, and Plato's search for underlying forms all contributed to the development of the scientific method. Even today, our approach to evidence, experimentation, and reasoning carries the imprint of Greek thought. Their questions: why does it happen? What causes it? How can we understand it? Are still central to science, philosophy, and everyday reasoning. Greek philosophy also shaped modern ethics and political theory. Concepts like justice, virtue, citizenship, and the common good have roots in Plato and Aristotle. Even today, debates about democracy, law, and moral responsibility often echo questions first posed thousands of years ago. When we discuss fairness, rights, or civic duty, we are participating in a conversation that began in the Agora, where Socrates asked citizens to examine life thoughtfully and honestly. And of course, their influence isn't only intellectual, it's cultural. Literature, art, theatre, and storytelling all carry echoes of Greek thought. Tragedies, comedies, and dialogues explored human nature, moral dilemmas, and social structures in ways that still resonate. The Greeks taught that life is worth examining, that curiosity is a virtue, and that reflection and imagination are intertwined. Their ideas encourage us to see the world with attention, to ask questions, and to think creatively about life, relationships, and society. There's also a subtle humour in how their ideas travelled and evolved. Imagine Aristotle's meticulous observations of animals centuries later being used to inspire philosophical debates, scientific theories, or even storytelling about dragons and mythical creatures. Or Plato's forms influencing art and architecture in ways he never imagined. Philosophy is alive, playful, and adaptable. It grows as humans interpret, reapply, and remix it across contexts. Greek philosophy's enduring legacy lies not just in its answers, but in its methods. The tools of questioning, reasoning, observing, and reflecting. Socratic dialogue, Aristotelian logic, Platonic abstraction. They teach us how to think, not just what to think. And that's why these ideas remain relevant. They are practices we can apply in our own lives, shaping how we learn, relate, and act. The legacy is practical, intimate, and profoundly human. Even today, we encounter these ideas in unexpected ways. Ethics in business, psychology, politics, science, and education all echo Greek reasoning. Stoicism inspires mindfulness and resilience. Plato and Aristotle guide debates on morality and governance. And our curiosity about the natural world, consciousness, and the universe continues to mirror questions first asked in ancient Greece. The river of thought flows, carrying ideas that remain alive, shaping our understanding, our choices, and our culture. And yet, Greek philosophy's greatest gift might be the invitation it extends to live thoughtfully. The Greeks didn't just want answers, they wanted reflective, examined lives. Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." It's a gentle nudge to pause, observe, question, and engage with the world, ethically, emotionally, intellectually, and imaginatively. The legacy of Greek philosophy is alive in the practice of curiosity, reflection, and care in our daily lives. So, as we move toward the final chapter of this journey, we carry forward a deep awareness. The ideas of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and others aren't relics of the past. They are living conversations, tools for thinking, feeling, and acting. They remind us that wisdom is a journey, curiosity is a practice, and reflection is a lifelong companion. From ethics to politics, love to science, metaphysics to logic, the threads of Greek thought weave a tapestry that continues to enrich human life. In the next and final chapter, we'll gently draw all these threads together, reflecting on how Greek philosophy can guide our own lives today. We'll consider what it means to live thoughtfully, cultivate virtue, nurture curiosity, and engage meaningfully with the world and people around us. It's a soft landing, a reflective conclusion, and a quiet invitation to carry these ideas into your own experience. As we arrive at the final chapter of our journey through Greek philosophy, it's time to bring everything home, to see how the ideas of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and their fellow thinkers can quietly shape our lives today. Greek philosophy wasn't just abstract thinking for ancient scholars. It's a guide for living thoughtfully, making better choices, and noticing the world with curiosity and care. And even though we're separated by thousands of years, the principles remain surprisingly practical. Let's start with the simple yet profound lesson from Socrates. Know thyself. Self-reflection, questioning our own assumptions, and observing our habits and choices can guide us toward wiser decisions. In modern life, this could be as small as pausing before reacting in a stressful moment, reflecting on why we feel anxious, or asking ourselves, am I acting in line with my values? Socratic questioning isn't just for philosophy classrooms. It's a tool for navigating work, relationships, and daily challenges with clarity. Plato reminds us to look beyond appearances, to seek depth and meaning. In a world full of distractions, social media, advertisements, endless notifications, it's easy to mistake shadows for reality. Plato encourages us to step back and consider what's truly valuable: integrity, kindness, curiosity, and wisdom. Even in mundane decisions, whether choosing friends, careers, or how we spend our free time, we can ask, does this align with what I believe is good and meaningful? It's subtle guidance, but profoundly grounding. Aristotle's emphasis on virtue and habit offers practical advice for daily living. We can cultivate habits that align with ethical values, patience, courage, honesty, and generosity. These habits shape character gradually, like tiny brushstrokes forming a larger painting. Aristotle reminds us that living well isn't about grand gestures alone. It's about consistent, thoughtful action. Maybe it's as simple as being honest with a colleague, showing kindness to a stranger, or taking time to reflect quietly each evening. Small choices accumulate, shaping the quality of our lives over time. Greek philosophy also teaches us the value of friendship and connection. Aristotle and Epicurus emphasize that relationships are not just enjoyable, they're essential for a flourishing life. In modern terms, this might mean nurturing friendships that challenge us, inspire growth, and provide support. It's about quality over quantity, about cultivating bonds where reflection, encouragement, and care are mutual. Even in a busy world, investing in relationships isn't a distraction. It's central to living meaningfully. Logic and reasoning remain invaluable tools. We live in a world saturated with information, opinions, and claims, some true, some misleading. Applying Aristotelian logic or Socratic questioning helps us navigate complexity, to identify assumptions, evaluate evidence, and think critically. When faced with decisions at work, home, or in daily life, these skills allow us to act more thoughtfully and avoid unnecessary mistakes. Logic is the gentle guide that keeps our minds clear amid noise and confusion. Greek philosophy also encourages curiosity about the natural world. Thales, Anaximander, and Aristotle remind us to observe, notice patterns, and ask questions about the world around us. Even something as ordinary as a sunset, the pattern of clouds, or the behavior of birds can spark reflection and wonder. This curiosity enriches life, turning everyday moments into opportunities for learning, contemplation, and appreciation. Science, observation, and wonder become part of our daily practice. Metaphysics reminds us to ask deeper questions, not to find absolute answers, but to engage thoughtfully with existence. Who are we? What matters? What is real? While we may not have the time to ponder Plato's forms over breakfast, we can still take quiet moments to reflect, meditate, or consider perspectives beyond our immediate experience. This deep thinking fosters humility, patience, and a richer sense of connection to life and the world. Stoicism, passed down through Greek and Roman thinkers, offers guidance for resilience. Life brings challenges, setbacks, and frustrations. By focusing on what we can control, reflecting calmly on events, and accepting what we cannot, we cultivate inner calm and perspective. It's a philosophy of everyday practicality, helpful in traffic jams, difficult conversations, or stressful work days. The Greeks remind us that a composed mind is not only peaceful, but effective in navigating life's ups and downs. And humour, of course, remains part of the package. Greek philosophers often had playful ways of presenting ideas, gently teasing assumptions, or illustrating concepts with everyday quirks. In our lives, a sense of humour keeps reflection grounded, reminding us that thoughtfulness doesn't require solemnity. It can coexist with joy, curiosity, and laughter. Philosophy isn't just serious. It's alive, human, and sometimes delightfully ironic. So, how do we weave all of this together in daily life? Take time to reflect, question assumptions, and examine your actions. Cultivate virtues and habits that align with your values. Nurture meaningful friendships and connections. Observe the natural world with curiosity. Think clearly, reason carefully, and approach challenges with calm resilience. Ask deeper questions about purpose, reality, and existence, not for immediate answers, but for guidance in living thoughtfully. And throughout it all, remember to notice beauty, enjoy small moments, and carry a light sense of humour. Greek philosophy, in essence, is an invitation to live deliberately, thoughtfully, and curiously. It's a gentle guide through life, reminding us that wisdom isn't a final destination, but a lifelong journey. The philosophers we've met, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Epicurus, the Stoics, and many others, offer tools, perspectives, and insights that continue to resonate because they address the timeless questions of being human. And as we bring this journey to a close, let's take a moment to reflect quietly, to notice our own thoughts and surroundings, and to carry forward the calm, curiosity, and insight that Greek philosophy encourages. There's no rush, no checklist, just gentle awareness, reflection, and the quiet joy of thinking thoughtfully. So now, dear listener, as your mind settles and the day winds down, let these reflections rest gently with you. Allow curiosity, reflection, and wisdom to linger softly as you prepare to rest. Let the questions, the observations, and the playful insights of the Greeks be companions in your quiet moments. And with that, it's time to close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the calm settle in. Good night.